Hey, everybody. Welcome back. Hunt Club Podcast, Cyberminds edition show. Back at the desk, virtual desk, Chris O'Donnell. If you haven't seen, Chris has been on another one of these. We got a slew of conversations with, I'm going to call it conversations with Chris over the course of the next few months. But Chris, why don't you say hi, introduce yourself so people know who you are and what you do.
Yeah, sure. Hey all. Kind of my focus is mainly around cybersecurity engineering, kind of mainly with kind of financial services and regulatory environments, and then kind of got a side piece around kind of blogging about all this type of stuff as a bit of a passion project. And yeah, I think it's quite interesting, and these kind of candid conversations around what's happening in the market and the industry overall.
Yeah, awesome. There isn't a shortage of stuff for us to talk about. So I'm going to throw I don't know if it's a weighty topic at you, but I think you might have a lot of opinions on this. I know I do. I hear a lot about, I don't know what words you want to put around it. I hear a lot around, a lot about the notion of preemptive security, proactive security, shift left, all that kind of stuff. And I wanted to pick your brain on that topic if you're game and kind of how you think about it. Sound good?
Yeah, let's shoot for it. Absolutely.
Um, I'm a Simon Sinek guy, so we'll start with the why. Why? Why proactive security?
I think first off, it probably sounds like really quite futuristic.
Yeah.
Being proactive with cyber. But I think there's different levers you can pull to maybe to kind of sort of model your way of thinking and model your operations in order to kind of leverage that approach. I think when we look at what's going on today, it's kind of like we feel like we're whack-a-mole. We're constantly behind. We're naturally always reactive. Our detection patterns are always kind of the stuff which we know about, which we've seen before, which are kind of what we're advised about. I think it's kind of an interesting conversation to say, well, how do you shift that mindset to be proactive? What does proactive kind of look like? Let's take a different angle on, okay, rather than waiting for the threat, let's try and hunt the threat naturally. And I think we've got kind of some pillars which we can kind of maybe talk about and discuss around how do we get there.
Yeah.
Actually makes it more exciting as well for our operational folk who kind of got a bit more of a keen interest rather than waiting for the alert, hunting for the alert, and seeing that trigger in a different way.
How do you even begin to you use the term whack-a-mole constantly on our heels, reacting to things? Like um, where do you even start? And it seems like a daunting. Hey guys, we're gonna be proactive now instead of reactive. Okay, so go. Like,
Yeah.
what's
So
the starting point?
yeah. I think when we look at kind of contextually and kind of look at the data behind how we kind of operate right now, right? Attacks being more sophisticated. We hear that in every conference we go to, every publication we read. The attack surface is huge, and how are we going to get ahead of that curve by anticipating kind of threats, but also kind of more robust defense. So kind of moving from the if to the when, really. So core pillars, which I think are quite interesting to discuss around kind of naturally threat intelligence, right? I think
Mhm.
there's been a lot of maturity in the market over the previous 5 years around actually, we can now focus on threat intelligence. But what we're saying here, or what I'm saying rather than kind of want to debate, is going beyond just the IOC and kind of it's not about kind of blacklists and things like that. It's much more about kind of understanding advisory, TTPs, the techniques, the procedures around how do we, look at motivations of attack vectors and things like that. So we can start to look at the patterns on how an attack vector might come to us. We look at actionable intelligence as well. I've kind of firsthand seen intelligence reports which are nice, great read, really good, really good kind of documentation. But how do we actually make it actionable for our organization? Obviously industry specific, and also across the industry as well, right? We could be, a victim due to some other other environment, or even a connotation to some ways of thinking. And then it's actually like, how do we make those kind of threat intelligence pieces actually kind of perform? So obviously, TI looks at vulnerability management, prioritizing your patches and things like that, but then actually hunting for threats within your environment. It's kind of those pieces where one could say, okay, I think we're okay in that space, but let's really hunt in that area in your kind of organization. But also then, I mentioned detection rules at the top there, kind of, the stuff which we know about. We know about the signatures, we know about certain behaviors of certain users. And I think this is like where we start to really leverage new technology. I actually don't want to use that word technology, because I read a wicked article this morning about actually the word technology is outdated, which is that's another phenomenon which we can talk about later, right? Because technology talks about toothpicks to AI, and that's just crazy. But we want to look at the best tools, actually leverage them to enhance our detections. And I think actually, and this is just one pillar talking about kind of threat intel right now, and then that really neatly ties back into our human risk, right? So from awareness to actually understanding human behaviors, and why that person in finance does something over here versus something over there, right? So I think you've got TI. I think you can also kind of wrap all that back up into kind of attack surface management, and even kind of beyond the seam, so to speak, as well.
Yes.
Loads of topics there.
I hear I think Gartner refers to it as it's not really a technology, more of a framework, more of a strategic view around continuous threat exposure management. It's like the ultimate, I would consider the ultimate in, I don't know if it's considered the ultimate in proactive security, but it's definitely a big piece of it. That's where it sounds like vulnerability. You're kind of how you're thinking about vulnerability management, attack surface management, things like that. So you alluded to, like, you talked about threat intel and actionable intelligence as pillars of kind of proactive security. Give me your thoughts. And we've talked about this the last time we were together on the podcast. Talk to me about the human element in security. Is human intelligence a pillar of, like, do you have the talent to shift to a proactive mindset? Is the mindset of a security person who's or process that's proactive require a different type of person, or a different type of thinking, or a different type of mindset?
I think it absolutely does. I think it really does, right? So I think this is where we start to blur capabilities and mindsets, especially when we look to kind of hire the right people for our organizations, right? So I think a really maybe a greater example is more like an engineer, which is probably a bit more relatable, right? So when you take an engineer, you're really looking for that problem solver. You're looking for that kind of, how do I fix this when everything else has gone completely wrong, right? I think where the market has taken us, and the industry has taken us, it's much more kind of treating it as a softer skill around, okay, if you can configure UI, you can configure anything, all through the UI. You don't have to think about scripting or anything like that. And actually, that isn't dead, right? So that's actually more prominent than ever before. So the engineering mindset, which I think, and kind of when I look personally at kind of how engineers, like traditional engineering worked, if you were like a gas engineer, you could also go and fix a gearbox on a tractor, right? Because it's the mindset of, okay, well, the mechanics need to work like this, and actually that's not working accordingly. So let's try these hypotheses until something works. I think where we've got to right now is actually that we think we can just pick up a manual and run with it, and actually we find so many hiccups along the way. So how do you compare that to obviously what we're talking about right here, in terms of kind of being proactive? You start to think, well, okay, if the pattern's working like this, and this is how as an attack vector is going before, they've got similar characteristics. So what would happen if they move that gear to this, move that gear to here? What would happen then? So it's much more of a mindset. So when hiring is kind of much more of a mindset of, okay, how does one approach and engage on that type of hunting, rather than kind of just because the manual says it's going to do this, that doesn't mean it's going to do it, right? So you get your TI brief, but it could be completely different. Obviously, some variants are very similar, but I think it is kind of a real mindset shift, and it's actually we become reliant on technology, right, in order to fuel this for us, and that's very natural given the industry which we're in. But actually, it's kind of just taking your head out of the game a little bit and thinking a bit more holistic around. Okay, well, there's other areas, and this is exactly where you weave in, your attack surface management, right? Because they've been hitting, certain endpoints or certain domains. That actually, that doesn't mean that they can't pivot to somewhere else. So that's how you should always look at kind of beyond the annual scanning is what kind of one of the key aspects of kind of our kind of ASM approaches. Obviously patching beyond those scanning, and then that prioritization piece, which ties into everything, right? About how we kind of identify areas of weakness a lot sooner.
Yeah, I think of 3 years ago. I started at Vectra 3 years ago, or a little over 3 years ago. Then I was new to this specific space in security. And we're describing what we did, and we're trying to come up with a description of like what our AI does. And the way you're talking about it, I'm going to throw this at you to get your reaction to it. There's obviously threat intel, right? There's actionable intel. There's human intelligence that's at play here. And I think there's a tremendous amount of value in what we've called attack signal intelligence. So how much intelligence can you glean from things that are already happening in your environment from an attack perspective, right? The attacker is doing this, right? This is where they've come in. This is how they've moved laterally. This is where they've escalated privileges. That's a tremendous amount of attack signal intelligence that you could use, that an engineer or problem solver could use to then go and be proactively and make sure that doesn't happen again, or put the right controls in place, or look for the right things to reduce mean time to detect. Tell me, and I think that's the role of AI a lot of times in terms of like delivering that attack signal intelligence and then ultimately making it actionable from a proactive standpoint. How do you think about that? Like, what's your reaction to that kind of philosophy?
Yeah, I think you pitched it there as kind of, an attack's happened, right? Which is absolutely kind of what mindset, one approach. I think also when you look at kind of these kind of tools and capabilities now, you can see users behaving in those similar patterns and identifying, whether it's signals or, I call them indicators. And you go, actually, that's basically they're identifying potential misconfiguration, right, with the state at the end of the day. And that's pretty spot on in terms of making that kind of actionable, and that is kind of the proactive approach, right? So, AI most certainly can advance that and summarize that data for us, which is awesome, and present it back at speeds which you've never seen before. And obviously, standard detection rules don't do that, which is which is obviously the advancement going into that capability. But actually, I think there's high value in looking at if our users are behaving like this, and we kind of think it's acceptable, then an attacker could easily follow the same pattern, right? So if it uses escalated privileges just like that to a certain role, and we think, okay, it's okay for them to have global read or whatever, well, actually, have we got a misconfiguration within our intra estate and things like that? So I think actually, to then summarize all of our user behaviors, which we see, those signals, those indicators, and go, bang, this is right. Actionable improvements which you can take into engineering is fantastic. I think that's really the nut behind, beyond the scan. The scan is always going to say, percentage compliance, things like that. Oh, you've not got the cert right or something like that, and that's okay. And that's an ever-moving beast. But when you actually add that capability of user, it's beyond UABA as well, right? We've got behavior analytics, that's cool, but we're actually looking at someone from A to B, and that's how they fulfilled their role. So have they fulfilled their role by actually a lack of control, which they don't know about, arguably. They're just exploiting because they can exploit, and they're not actually doing it maliciously. So I think that's a pretty rapid advancement, which then turns the dial again to becoming proactive.
Yeah, totally. What are some of the why culturally, and I'm not going to make a blanket statement like, why aren't security teams doing this in mass? I mean, I'm sure they are. I mean, sure, a lot of teams are kind of in this direction, taking baby steps, some maybe further along, but what's it going to take culturally, right, for, the promise of proactive security to be a reality? Is it going to take more people? Is it going to take more AI? Is it going to take more Is it a complete mindset shift? Is it a come from the top down? Is it a business mandate? What do you think the drivers are?
I think it's always going to be a bit of a blend, right? Great tech, always great outputs and things like that. More people can enhance things. I think where we come from, I think from a kind of industry, maybe even arguably legacy perspective. Now, can we throw the word legacy into the world of cybersecurity right now? Maybe we can, maybe we can't. Who knows? It has been around long enough. But maybe that's another one for the technology debate. But I think where we've navigated towards, we've gone to a pattern of throw everything to SIEM, and naturally you kind of get a bit of alert fatigue. And I think one thing which I see is we need to tune our SIEM, tune those rules, tune those detection patterns. And actually what we're not saying is we need to change the user behavior of our organization, because the policy is correct, the alerts are actually accurate, but the people aren't behaving correctly. So I think one of the biggest things is shifting from that alert fatigue. I think also natural kind of investigation into potential malicious activity can take too long. We're burdening our own time and resources there. And then actually, when we say we want to put AI in, the trust with AI, and that's why I kind of come back to the blend. I think what we need is kind of really clear architecture and definitions on how we engage around behavioral activities within our estate, which then trigger naturally onto our alerts, whether that goes to the MSSP or goes into the internal SOC. And by doing that, is that that's what I see as the kind of the key turn activity to say, actually, we're going to be able to reduce the noise of kind of blanket alerting every day, because someone's suddenly activated printing on their endpoint, which actually they're done through misconfiguration within our estate, to actually then going, right, okay, these are the detection patterns which is acted as, and that's where we can kind of look towards. So it's a bit more kind of hypothesis driven around kind of changing our organization, rather than saying we need X, Y, and Z in this investment case in order to in order to kind of go and do that type of stuff. And I think also, when we create applications, and obviously, many people listening to this probably sit in an organization where they're creating their own tech, they're creating their own products, it's going out to market and things like that. You've got natural engagement with those teams, and obviously bringing them in early. So when you come to actually drop in alerting on those applications, those user behaviors, and you configure those to see or try and identify malicious activity, you're not kind of going completely off on a different tandem. And that's kind of all ties back into the kind of natural SDLC cycle, and actually adopting those right principles across the whole area. And we've got great tools in that space, DAST and SAST, and and all those SCA type pieces. But actually, how we engage in them correctly. I think the other piece to that is going back to that kind of alert fatigue. We need to put more kind of emphasis into orchestration, automation, and I am a firm believer, like there are, in order to get kind of that perfect SOC model, it's evolution. You take the Darwin theory of walking before running and things like that. Starting with kind of detections and tuning them, then going into automations. That's like an automated response, or it's automated then correlation, and then orchestrating that, and then going into AI. I think if we went for a fire from the hip straight into AI type model, and maybe some people who are listening to this who've done that and they've got some great use cases, I'd love to hear them, and come and join us for a discussion on here, because I think that'd be awesome as well to share. But I think a solid foundation transition of that kind of evolutionary piece is kind of how we then navigate to getting into a world of kind of proactive rather than kind of reactive state.
Yeah. I think you nailed it in terms of, like, I think there's a lot of companies trying to figure out where to use and how to use AI and how to measure the value of it.
Yeah.
But the way I wrote this down, because you were like, start with automation. Like, what tasks do you need to automate? And then go into orchestration, right? Start tying things together. Then decide what use cases around automation and orchestration are best equipped for AI. And that's what I want to, so there's there's kind of a maturity flow there. It's a kind of a framework for that. You said a couple things. Let me see if I summed this up correctly, and then I want to get your kind of answer to where should people start. I'm going to read this back to you. Do you know the Dunning-Kruger effect?
Yeah,
Have you seen that?
Yeah.
And I'm like, you said shift away from alerts, and I wrote down focus. Start with focusing on what I need to know that I don't know.
Yeah.
Right. And today we call those alerts, and we as an industry think we need to detect every possible threat and alert on it because that's the stuff we need to know.
Yeah.
And I would argue we don't necessarily need to know all of that. Now, compliance might tell us we need to know that, right?
Yeah.
But I'm like, do we need to know every possible threat? That's why we have 4,000 alerts a day. So first, focus on what I need to know that I don't know. And there's a different way of if you're able to do that efficiently, effectively, you're going to free up time to focus on knowing what we don't know that we need to know. And that's where I think behavioral analytics, that's where I think shifts. That's what I think the proactive mindset is. It's like, what do we need to know that we don't know? Right. And how do we get proactive about addressing those needs through orchestration, automation, AI, whatever it might be? Does that begin to enable us to shift to a more proactive mindset, or at least a portion of the security team or the human talent to a proactive mindset? Am I reading that back to you the right way?
Yeah. Absolutely. I think the piece here is that proactive security is not necessarily a destination.
No.
That is what we should be doing, and that is the journey of the future, right? So it's not like we're going to go and achieve it by doing all this. These are just triggers to kind of get us mobilized onto that approach, right? Whereas reactive, you can kind of tick the box on because you know it. You know what you want to what you want to detect for.
Yeah.
And that's the
you can measure it too.
Exactly.
You can measure how fast can I do it versus
how many that's on the game.
Yeah. Proactive is more about, there's semblance of like posture improvement and things like that, like the outcomes of proactive security. 100%. Like, give me three things. I'm a three things guy. Three things security teams can do today to begin to think about embracing or implementing a proactive security kind of motion.
I think so. I think easily. Cultural shift. Like we mentioned, the mindset, the actual. Okay, we need to start navigating over here rather than kind of looking for all those kind of existing things. I think the other thing is really start small and kind of scale up. And we're not trying to achieve everything. We're not trying to go and threat hunt. Do everything within the environment. It's kind of like incubate that idea, whether someone's doing it a few hours or and then start to build that and weave that pattern in into that kind of operational piece. I think it's actually when we talk about product teams going out and an SDLC cycle, I think that's a real pivotal group in order to influence around that, really understanding how the tech works for your organization and that communication and collaboration, and kind of breaking down those silos which are kind of there naturally, but then building really good patterns for kind of users and analyzing how people are using those products to identify those misconfiguration and bring it into your engineering backlog.
Yeah, you just did people, process, technology, and order.
Yeah, I did.
The way you answered it. Is that conscious or subconscious?
Subconscious.
Awesome. I always enjoy talking to you, Chris. This is great. This is fantastic. I took a ton of notes because I'm looking for ideas for our next conversation as well. We've got a bunch queued up, but you're busy. I appreciate you coming on the show, ranting, riffing on topics like this, and always learn something. So wheels are always turning on the next time I have you on.
Absolutely. Look forward to it.
Awesome. Thanks Chris.
All right. Take care.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.